Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thanks for joining our weekly live discussion here today. This is the podcast all related to digital transformation. This is part of the Transformation Ground Control podcast that we do every week. So thank you for joining here today. We're here to talk about building an AI-first strategy without the ERP baggage. So we'll talk about AI strategies and how certain companies, including our guest here today, how they're approaching the AI types of strategies here today. So excited to have our guest here today. But before I introduce him here in just a moment, I'll kick off a couple of logistical items. First of all, we're streaming live to YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, etc. Streaming to all sorts of channels here today. So thank you for joining wherever you are joining from here today. We are glad to have you here today, and we're glad to have our guest. Second of all, we are going to ask a bunch of questions of our guest here today. He's going to be on the hot seat, not so much on the hot seat, but we're going to ask a lot of questions here today about digital transformation and AI in particular here today. So glad to have our guest here today, and would love to hear any questions that you all have for our guest here today as well. So if you don't mind just dropping the chat, we're going to keep an eye on the chat here. So any questions you have, we will get to here today. So any questions you have, please feel free to chime in and ask those questions. If you don't mind also just letting us know where in the world you're joining from today, what city and country are you joining from today? We'd love to hear where our global audience is joining from here today. And we'll get to your questions too. So we'll keep an eye on the chat here today. Great conversation we're looking forward to here today. Building an AI first strategy without the ERP baggage is the topic here today. And really what we want to do is talk about why and how organizations are looking at AI types of strategies that aren't necessarily dependent on a full-blown ERP back office implementation or back office replacement. So we're going to talk about just a bit of an alternative approach to how organizations are approaching their digital transformations without necessarily having to replace all their back office systems. So joining us here today is Brian Perkins, who's the head of IT for a company called Sumitomo Drive Technologies. So Brian, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Eric.
Yeah, so really interesting stuff that you are focused on here these days in your role. I'm sure you've done a lot of interesting stuff. We've talked about some of the stuff you've done in your career throughout the years, but this is pretty interesting. This is really interesting, the stuff you're doing right now as it relates to your AI approach. And there's a lot of hype around AI. It's a big buzzword. A lot of there's a lot of hype, obviously, around that. So want to talk here today about what you guys are doing at Sumitomo to approach your AI first digital transformation. So before we get into the questions I've got for you, and we'll get to the audience questions as well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Brian, if you don't mind. Just how did you grow up in this space, and how did you end up where you are now as the head of IT here at Sumitomo?
Well, I started at Sumitomo back in 1994 as an Informix programmer, believe it or not. So that's quite a few iterations of programming languages ago. But through the years, just moved up through the IT organization and have been really in IT management since around 2000.
Great. And what just out of curiosity, just as a high level starting point, what drew you to the world of IT? Like how did you end up in the IT space in general? Like what led you down this path?
Well, believe it or not, so right out of college, I worked for the state of New York, Office of General Services in Albany, New York, and they actually had a typing pool, and they had this new revolutionary computer program called 𝗪𝗵𝘁. And they asked me if I would train the folks in the typing pool how to use word processing. And that's actually how I sort of got my feet into the programming world, and from there, I just never looked back.
Yeah, that's how you got started, and dipped your toes, or tried out the whole IT space, and you couldn't get away from it.
Yep.
Good deal. So tell us, just real quickly, if you don't mind, just share a little bit about Sumitomo. What is Sumitomo? What do you guys do? Just for the audience who may not know the company.
Well, we manufacture non-automotive gearbox and gear motors. So we have product that goes on a lot of applications, conveyor belts, mining applications, food and beverage, pretty much a lot of different applications and use cases for our product.
Good deal. And so, you've been a client of ours for a while now, but for those that aren't familiar with Sumitomo and what you're doing here with your overall digital transformation, what does an AI first strategy mean to you guys? Like, tell us a little bit about, how did you come into this world of AI, and what led you down this path to start thinking like, hey, we could be using AI right now to automate our business or to make our business more effective? How did we get here?
Well, we came into 2025 and we didn't have a set strategy. In fact, we were, lack of a better term, stuck. We had half of our organization thought, maybe we ought to replace our legacy ERP system that we've had for several years. And then the other half really wanted to look at tools that would augment and complement our ERP system. And I think one of the key things we had to do was sort of get some unification and alignment across not just the executives, but I think most of the core users going forward. Because again, as you just mentioned, AI is a big buzzword. There's a lot of folks who are hearing it, and of course they're always asking IT, well, what are you doing about AI? And we didn't really know what direction we should go, so that's why we engaged Third Stage to come in. And I think one of the things in helping us determine a path was really to sit down in workshops with the functional users and say, what are the challenges and pain points that you are experiencing? And when we walked through that process, one of the key takeaways was our ERP system was actually running pretty well. In fact, none of the pain points really pointed to a fundamental switch change of the ERP application. But what we did have a big challenge on is we have a variety of different applications, and really automating or getting data across different applications or data sets was really our biggest constraint and challenge internally.
Right. And what led you to say, let's look at AI first versus, the traditional approach? If we were having this conversation 10 years ago or 20 years ago, we might have said, let's start with an ERP system. A lot of organizations will start with an ERP first sort of strategy, and you guys have said, let's not abandon the ERP strategy, but let's look at other ways of approaching our digital transformation. What led you down this path of not taking that traditional, historically sound approach that most organizations might have done 10 years ago or so?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons why we sort of really came to this conclusion. The first one was really, we didn't want to have the kind of disruption that normally comes with a big ERP implementation. That was pretty much set forth by our executives. They don't want any disruption to the business, and they didn't really want to have any downtime. And I think overall with an ERP system, we have built a lot of efficiency into the current application. And maybe this is just my experience, but I think you really have to tear down all of your processes to create a new baseline for whichever ERP system you're implementing. So they all have what they call, okay, well, this is best of breed, or, but honestly, what it is a baseline of their applications. And you have to really bring the company down to that level and then you can start building back up the efficiencies. So
Yeah.
we didn't really want to go down that path, but at the same time, we knew we needed to enhance some of the functionality that we didn't have, natively in the ERP system itself. So I think talking about a data set or a data lake that really encompasses all of our data with an AI layer on top of that, it's not disruptive. It's fairly quick to see how the business can take advantage of that kind of value almost immediately without really having to go through a very lengthy, drawn out ERP project. And I say that because at some point we will have to go through an ERP implementation, but I think what we determined is it's probably not right for us right now.
Right. You're not just going to rush into it, or you're not looking at it as a prerequisite or a must-have before embarking on other tech initiatives. How did, just out of curiosity, I mean, you're an IT guy, right? You lead the IT department at Sumitomo. Did others fall into line in recognizing that opportunity to take a different approach, or were there sort of that traditional legacy mindset of, hey, let's replace our ERP system and then we'll go through, we'll add AI layered on top of that afterwards? Or like, how did you navigate that? Was this something that you had to push forward, or how did others receive this idea or this message?
Well, I think we started at the top. So we got the executives to sort of come to an alignment that what the business really needed was those type of tools without having a big change of our actual transactional processes. And again, we looked at our ERP system and it's running the business quite well. Again, it's not perfect. There's still a lot of things that are missing. But when we really sort of weigh the options of what's going to become more valuable to the organization, it really was, let's look at something that will augment and complement what we currently have.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't look at this as more of I know the title of this is AI first, but I think of it more as a data first approach. So for us, it's really digitizing the data, getting an understanding and getting our arms around all the various systems. I mean, I think we've got over 30 systems that have data and they're not talking to one another. So I think that's one of the things we're looking for AI to do, is help branch across, disparate data sources and data silos, and really allow the user to get information much quicker.
Yeah. 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 A different approach. I mean, not everyone's thinking that way. And that's what's so interesting is, I think for those of us that grew up in the space, the tendency is to think data first, as you mentioned, data first, let's get an ERP system, let's get that in place. And what did you do? Just coming back to this data concept, because you hit a really good point, which is AI doesn't really mean a whole lot or do a whole lot for an organization if the data is not right and you don't have clean, accurate data in the systems that you're working from. But how did you approach that? I mean, what did you find as you got into this? I mean, as far as, was the data okay, or was it a massive undertaking to clean that up, or how did you approach the data side of things?
Well, we're still pretty early in the journey, so I don't have a definitive answer for that yet, but I think there is going to be quite a level of effort that we have to undergo to sort of get some of those data sources pulled into a data lake or a data warehouse type application.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. I want to turn to the audience real quickly and say hello to some people that are commenting here. Darian on LinkedIn says good morning. So good morning, Darian. Thanks for being here today. 𝗪𝗏𝗁𝗃 says good morning from Southern California. 𝗪𝗵𝘁 on LinkedIn says hello or good afternoon from South Africa. Thanks for being here today. And we have Dennis Anthony here today joining on LinkedIn. Thank you for being here today. Someone's joining from New Jersey. I don't see the name here, but someone, unfortunately, it doesn't tell me the name of the person, but whoever you are, thank you for joining from New Jersey here today. And Yeah, there's hopefully everyone's on here okay. Someone on LinkedIn says, has it started? Screen says still waiting for us to start. Hopefully you're in okay now. And then here on oops, let me go back to here. From Minoj on YouTube, I'm a 14 years experience in Oracle and ERP architect. What is the next step that I should take in my career? While AI agents are evolving, would like your suggestions towards career direction. So I guess maybe just as maybe a more general question for you, Brian, from what you've seen so far, I know you're early in the journey, you're just getting started here on this AI transformation you're going through, but what's your prediction here as far as how AI will affect us all, in our careers in IT, and what do you think the major shifts will be, or what do you anticipate will happen here in this world?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball and I could see exactly where all this is going to land, but
me too. That's why I'm asking you.
Just having a lot of years in experience in technology, this is probably one of the most exciting times, I think, to be in tech. Just with all the moving parts, I think AI is still being defined, because I think it's a buzzword. It's used in marketing. Every vendor is trying to determine how AI is going to apply to them. But I think what we're seeing in the broader market, I mean, especially with the news yesterday of AMD and OpenAI having an agreement, I just think, and then with Microsoft opening up Copilot to ChatGPT-5, I mean, there's so many moving parts in this going forward. It's really exciting to see you're almost waiting. What's next? I think the data centers are still all being built. I think the chipsets all have to be, built and produced. But I think once this really starts to take shape, it absolutely has the potential to revolutionize this industry.
Yeah.
But I think short term for us, I mean, what we're really looking for is to allow users to get access to data much faster. If we have the right data, then we can minimize, internal errors that obviously cost us time and money. And for us, a big part of our operating model is to, exceed our customers' expectations, especially on hitting their delivery date for product. And again, one little thing that we can really maximize is trying to decrease the amount of potential opportunities that come up that are constraints against working towards getting the product out the door.
Right.
And I think AI will definitely help us when we can access all of our corporate data from one place.
Yeah. And speaking of data, this is an interesting question here from 𝗪𝗵𝘁 on LinkedIn. And 𝗪𝗵𝘁 says, what kind of data harmonization and reporting tools are you envisioning? So, you're talking about the data side of things and how there's a lot of cleanup you've had to do. Tell us a little bit about the whole data journey. I know it's not the most exciting topic to talk about, but but data is it's a necessary evil, right? Especially with AI. It's always been a necessary thing, something that's very important. But now with AI, it's even more important, because bad data, if you've got garbage in, you've got garbage out from an AI perspective. But how did you approach the whole, tell us a little bit about, just at a high level, what did the AI or the data harmonization journey look like for you guys?
Well, I think for us, what our approach really is right now is we're targeting specific use cases. So we're not trying to throw all of our data into one big pool and then try to normalize it after the fact. We're taking very specific use cases, and we're trying to align the data that goes to those use cases. And once we sort of have that set, we can understand, what kind of data cleanup is required, if any. But especially when we get to engineering data, we know we've got duplicates in our data set. We've got some other cleanup to do. But whenever we finally get to a point where we feel, that can be normalized easily through an AI tool, then we'll be able to see that through the value that it produces for the specific use case that we were solving for.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think as far as the other question, part of the question was reporting. So we do use a BI tool, and I think, you know, between that and some of the reporting that we do out of our ERP, we'll be able to sort of see what kind of data cleanup we have to do continually.
Yeah. Now, what about looking at specific use cases within Sumitomo's operations? Like, there's a lot of hype around AI. There's a lot of opportunity for AI to automate and to enable better processes for lots of organizations. But a lot of our clients, including yourselves, you start to ask the question of, where do we start? You know, how can we get some low-hanging fruit, some quick wins? How can we leverage AI without trying to boil the ocean? Like, how did you guys view specific use cases, or, you know, how did you identify those use cases that are going to be the most valuable or the most opportunistic in terms of AI use cases?
Well, I wish it was all on, you know, the decisions we made, but quite honestly, it was whenever we had third stage come in and actually walk through the workshops with the users. And when we realized, you know, where are the constraints, where are the challenges and the pain points that we have today, we took those, and then we started to say, okay, what if we could have access across data sets? What if we could have automated processes for notifications or other type of transactions that weren't just within one specific data silo? And I think once we started to dream a little bit, that started to open up some opportunity for, you know, this is how we really ultimately would solve the problem. And then we realized, okay, well, we can't do that just natively within our ERP system. So that's when we started looking at, okay, what are the other tools that we can layer on top of our existing tech stack to sort of solve those issues?
Right. Yeah, and it's you know, a lot of organizations find that, you know, you can get lost in AI. I mean, there's so many ways that AI could be helping the organization, but you have to prioritize, right, and figure out which ones have the most immediate opportunity without, you know, with the least amount of risk. You know, how did you guys approach that side of it, as far as understanding where, you know, how did you prioritize or narrow it down to where AI could help the most without necessarily disrupting or getting too enamored with AI, if that makes sense?
Well, I think the first process we really wanted to tackle was really creating that data lake, data pool, and then have agentic AI calls on top of it, because that really will allow the users to start getting access to data, or to start seeing trends that today we don't see because we don't have any cross-pollination between the data sources. And I think, you know, going forward, as I mentioned earlier, I think AI is still being defined. So in some cases, is it automating a transaction? Is it just automating a notification to send an email when some triggered event happens? I mean, you could technically say that's not AI, you know, that it could be something that's just more of an RPA, or it could be something more of just a subroutine. But again, I think it's going to be exciting how these tools start to learn, and especially over time start progressing to where they can provide that kind of business value almost immediately.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of AI, is you don't necessarily need to go through the entire ERP, the traditional ERP upgrade to take advantage of it.
Right.
Super interesting. So here's a comment or question here from Dennis on LinkedIn. Dennis says, when shifting to an AI first architecture independent of traditional ERP frameworks, how can organizations design their data and process layers to maintain real-time visibility, ensure interoperability, and prevent fragmentation across business functions? So, without getting into a super deep dive masterclass of enterprise architecture here, you know, how do you view your other systems? I mean, how are you conceptually viewing AI in the realm of, or within the overall enterprise tech landscape that you've got at Sumitomo?
Well, we're not really changing anything in the core tech stack. So all of our applications are going to stay as is for now. But what we're looking to do is create a interoperability component where basically we can bring the data into a centralized area, and then we can actually start to develop some AI specific triggers, so to speak, on top of that, data lake. So that's how we approached it. There's no real magic as far as data normalization and data cleanup and setting up data structures. We're still in the midst of that, so I don't really have any great guidance to give on that point yet.
Right.
Still to come.
Yeah. We'll ask you again in a few months, and you'll probably have a better idea once you've gone into the line of fire related to that. And this might be a similar question that you can't answer yet, but we'll try it anyway. This is from Darian on LinkedIn. And what's been so far in your journey? I know it's early and there's a lot more to do here, but what's been the hardest part about harmonizing data across 30 plus systems so far? When you look at the data side of AI, what have some of your initial conclusions or findings been?
Well, I think instead of just conclusions, one of the topics that we're still discussing is, how much data cleanup do you really have to do? I think when we started this journey, we heard, well, you don't really have to do any, just sort of throw it all in one big pot and then let AI sort of, normalize it through its processes. But I think when we start looking, again, we're focusing on specific use cases. So we're not just trying to boil the ocean and stick all of our data in a central repository all at one time. We're trying to be very strategic about, okay, what does a specific use case require and from what systems? And then looking at that data and say, okay, do we have to do some very specific data cleanup, or do we just sort of throw it all in and then start trying to run some queries against it?
Right.
So we really haven't got down to too much very specific data cleanup exercises yet.
Yeah.
We're still trying to even determine what data sets we need.
Yeah. And what the status is of the data sets you have and where you need to clean up and all that. I imagine that's a big undertaking. And it's interesting because data's, it's one of those things that you've had it for however long, you've had those data sets, but now you start to look at it like, is that what we need? Is that the real, is that data set going to work for us, in this AI environment that we're entering into? I imagine that's a good point of self-reflection. And it's also good because, a lot of people listening here today, I think, would probably relate to the fact that AI has been a challenge for them. Having clean data and accurate data is a challenge for a lot of organizations, but it gets magnified or it gets underscored by the fact that you're trying to deploy AI now, and AI will not work well or be effective without good data.
Yeah, and I think, especially when we're trying to do data for BI applications, and BI reporting, I think it follows a very similar track. So the first thing you need to do is identify what are the data sets that you really need. And then for us, we were pulling data from different data sources into a BI tool to get that sort of cross application reporting. But again, that's only reporting. It still doesn't have the detail level that you really need to make business decisions. So I think AI, what we're really hoping is that, the AI will sort of magnify what we're sort of seeing with our BI tool, and really help us to sort of determine where the real true north is. Because right now you can get a lot of, different results, I guess, out of AI. So I think that's part of our process too. We're cautiously optimistic as we go down this path.
Right. Yeah, super interesting. And when you think about how you guys are planning to use AI, what are some examples, or can you share specific outcomes or areas of business value that you expect to get from AI? I think you started to touch on it a little bit a moment ago, but let's dive into that a little bit more. I mean, where do you see, when you were talking about agentic AI a few moments ago, where do you see the biggest opportunities? Like if you're just to back up for here for a second and say, why AI? Why are we even going down this path? What sorts of business improvements or enhancements do you think you'll get from AI?
Well, I think the bottom core for us is twofold. So first of all, it's just access to data quickly. So what we've seen is, I think AI tools have the capability of producing results much faster than if we were trying to write specific reports and BI and make sure all the data was aligned. I mean, it sort of crosses all of your data sets and pulls in a variety of different kind of data to give you the result. And the second thing is really just the notification type transactions. So, when one system is being utilized, for example, for us, we're a big engineering company as well. So, if engineering is pulling out a CAD model to do modifications, we want it to go check the ERP system to see if we've actually sent that model out to a vendor or supplier to make a part for us. And today that's still a manual triggered system. So someone would have to remember, okay, well, we've got to go check to make sure that it's not actually on an open PO. But we want AI to sort of do all that automatically.
Right.
And notify us and say, hey, that's on a PO that hasn't been received yet. So you need to make sure you update the revision or notify procurement that there's a revision.
Right. Right.
And that's just a specific use case that we have for crossing between applications.
Yeah. And I think that's key though, is to have that clarity around, where do we think we can improve our business and get business value? Because I think, it seems like a lot of organizations right now, a lot of clients we work with are getting almost too enamored by AI. There's too much fluff and hype and excitement around it without a clear vision of what it is you want to get out of it. What exactly you're trying to do with your business. And it sounds like that's what you've spent a lot of time doing is let's define those areas where we think we can get some quick wins or get some immediate value out of AI. What when you think about innovation and risk, and this is interesting from a couple lenses. You think about innovation and risk. How can we be innovative with AI and take advantage of this emerging technology without getting too crazy? Without taking on too much risk. Especially, I guess I ask this more from a perspective of being a Japanese-owned organization that, not to be too stereotypical, but a lot of Japanese firms are risk adverse, right? They don't want to take on a huge amount of risk. And to some, this whole AI journey you're on might sound risky. Sounds like a little bleeding edge for some organizations. How did you balance that? How did you balance the need for, taking on innovation and being creative with your use of technology, but at the same time managing risk? How did you balance those two things?
Well, what we like to do is we like to pilot things first before we just go all in, and then we like to scale. So once you sort of prove out, maybe with a small use case, or I think people, when they start to see the potential value of, like you mentioned, a quick win or something of value that you're struggling with today, or a challenge, and if you can sort of mitigate that challenge with some kind of solution, that also starts to get more users engaged. So it gets the users engaged, it gets management engaged, because now they're seeing, hey, this thing can potentially help us. And so we like to pilot first and then scale, because you're right. We are very conservative when it comes to innovation. We're not going to just throw everything, and especially a bunch of money. I mean, we're a manufacturing company, so I'm always competing against bridge mills and other, equipment that's needed on the manufacturing floor. And it's really difficult to just get, money to just say, hey, we want to go, buy this AI solution.
Right. Just because it sounds fun. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I've got a little extra time on my plate here. Let's go embark on an AI initiative. How have others, so you being the tech guy, I would suspect that you're probably a bit more open to this concept of using AI. How have others in the organization, like the average business user, the average employee, how are they viewing AI so far? Are they excited? Are they skeptical? Are they nervous? Like how would you describe the lay of the land for the average employee at Sumitomo?
I think right now there's a lot of excitement.
Yeah.
So, we've rolled out Copilot. We're Microsoft shop. So, Copilot has been something that we've seen the evolution on. I wouldn't say it was a magical productivity tool out of the gate, but I think as we have seen Microsoft, add and definitely expand out the portfolio of what Copilot is offering, I think it's giving productivity tools to users that, for those who start using them and learning them, they're really seeing a lot of potential value.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and it's I'll be curious to see as we embark on this journey together with you, and seeing how, as we get into the details of how AI is going to affect different people in the organization. I'll be curious to see what that journey looks like. Some might remain excited throughout. I would imagine others get a little nervous or a little scared. There's some uncertainty around, okay, you're putting AI in place to do what? Are you doing it to replace my job? Are you doing it to, take away the heroics that I've typically brought to the table here? If I'm a person that's built this amazing spreadsheet and an amazing set of tribal knowledge that no one else has, there's a lot of pride and value in that, or perceived value. But AI threatens that, right? It makes me potentially think that I'm not as important now that you're putting in these AI tools that can automate a lot of what I've done in the past, or the heroics I brought to the table. Have you seen any of that yet, or do you anticipate that might be a challenge for Sumitomo?
I think in certain areas, I can see where people could perceive it as a threat, but I don't feel AI is mature enough to be at that level yet. I think it could be coming. And again, this is why this is so exciting, because this either has, it's going to really produce the results that is what the hype is all telling us that it's going to do, or, it's going to change and morph into maybe more of just being a productivity tool.
Right.
I think that's what everyone's still waiting on, is what is the ultimate outcome of these AI tools.
Right. And speaking of outcomes, here's an interesting question from another question from Rama Krishna on LinkedIn. Rama says, what kind of specific monetary benefits / ROI are you planning to track, as opposed to qualitative speed to insights benefits? So do you have a business case of sorts that tells you this is what we want to get out of AI, or how it's going to improve our business, or how did you approach the ROI quantitative business case side of things?
So each one of our use cases is slightly different. So not all are just tied to like a financial KPI. So some of them, just having access to certain data events across applications. If those can save us from a potential mitigated risk later downstream, those kind of events, when they do occur, are costly. So, earlier I was talking about, engineering having a revision on a CAD model, and that same drawing is actually being built by a supplier or vendor. If we don't catch it in process, we find it when we receive the part, and then our quality control checks it and says, well, this isn't the right part. Suddenly that becomes expensive for Sumitomo, because now we have to not only replace and get the right part, but now we're probably expediting because we've lost time.
Right.
So it's also mitigating against, those kind of events and occurrences that cost us money. So each use case has some financial variables attached to it. And again, I think over time we'll start to see, are we reducing our errors? Are we, is the speed and access to data, is that giving us the kind of value that we were hoping to really prove out the ROI?
Right.
We aren't there yet. We're still pretty early in the journey, so I don't really have a lot of metrics to show against.
Right. You haven't done the full benefits realization activity yet to see what benefits we actually got and that sort of thing.
Right.
So when you think about the traditional enterprise tech landscape, how do you ensure that AI is integrating with that? So, you've got your legacy system, you've got your legacy data, processes, all that stuff. How are you putting this all together? You've got AI, which is obviously very forward-thinking, innovative technology that is new to most organizations. How do you balance that, or how do you introduce AI into a world where you've got these legacy systems and data sets, and in some cases maybe the technology is a bit outdated, but you're still bringing AI into the landscape here? How did you balance all of that? That.
Well, our strategy is basically to pull the data out of all of our current existing systems and pull it into a data lake, data warehouse solution, and then have the AI run on top of that. So we're not actually modifying or changing any of our specific data elements within the applications. Those are all staying as is.
Right.
And we see that as a big benefit because, again, there's no disruption. We don't have to change any of our existing systems to accommodate it. We're actually creating something new. And I think when we're moving in that kind of environment and that kind of model, it actually opens up to where, we're sort of building a greenfield, but it's actually sitting on top of our existing tech stack.
Right. That's super interesting. And what would you advise organizations to do that maybe are working off these semi-outdated or just older legacy systems, but they're thinking about embarking on an AI strategy like this? What are the biggest takeaways or lessons you would share with other peers, IT directors, CIOs, that sort of thing?
I think the biggest benefit we got, because again, when we started this in the beginning of the year, we didn't have a specific strategy to go down. We weren't just saying we're going to go all down this AI journey. I think it was really the workshops and getting the feedback directly from the users to say, where are your challenges? Where are your pain points? Where are the constraints? And very quickly, I think it not just to IT, but I think to the general departmental users, they realize very quickly it's not necessarily the ERP that's our constraint. The biggest challenge was data. And I think when we realized that sort of opened up, the whole avenue to move in AI. I think if we had just chosen an AI strategy at the beginning of the year, we still would have been fighting this whole, technology obsolescence question about our legacy ERP. But now that we've already gone through that exercise, it really pointed everybody and created an alignment of this is really what we need to do next.
Right. Yeah. And how was it? How were your executive peers perceiving this whole thing? Were they excited about it as well? Were they maybe unrealistic about the hype, or were they buying into the hype? I mean, how did your peers view AI, when you first brought this to the table, or when you guys first started discussing this?
Again, I think the alignment with the executives happened relatively quickly because, again, we were getting realistic, output from those exercises that really was pointing to the ERP system. Yes, it's an older legacy system, but it's running pretty efficiently and it's still scalable. So we don't have any huge constraint on the ERP side. And I think once they sort of got comfortable with that, then the next thing was, okay, what's next? And I think the what's next question really started to get some excitement because then they realized, hey, we can build something that we don't currently have.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. And what about when you think about impacts to the organization, to the average employee job, to just the operations in general? I know it's early still, but we're in that phase with you now where you start thinking about how is this going to impact people? How are they going to receive it? How are we going to help them through the journey and through the transition? What early lessons do you have from that, knowing that you haven't gotten deep into it yet? But how organizationally, how do you see this affecting Sumitomo?
I don't really see. I don't think it's really taken hold of the organization yet. I think there's a few key users who are excited about the potential, particularly those that are dealing with some of the biggest challenges and constraints. They really want to solve these problems. I think they're more engaged than other folks. I do feel a lot of people are still on the sidelines waiting to see, is it really going to do what we think it's going to do?
Right. Yeah. A lot still to be determined, right?
Right.
So for those fellow CIOs and IT managers that are listening in here today and they're thinking about potentially embarking on an AI journey like what you're embarking on right now, what big lessons or takeaways do you have? I mean, what's if you had to give one piece of advice to people that are just getting going on this journey, that are a little behind where you are, but they're ready to dip their toe into AI and start deploying AI within their organizations, what's the big takeaway you've got so far, the big lesson?
I would say try to get that organizational alignment up front, because that gives you momentum. And that momentum then bleeds to more engagement from individuals. And I think specific to AI, I think it's, also approach it with some caution. Because again, what is it that you're really defining? I mean, is it true artificial intelligence, or is it really more of a subroutine or RPA that a vendor has? And I think, even for us, we don't know all of the pitfalls yet. We're still in the journey. And so I think there's still a lot of that being cautious and moving at a very mannered pace, so we don't get too far down a path that suddenly we're like, okay, this isn't really that valuable.
Right. Yeah, it's good. It's good advice. Good takeaway for those that might be embarking on a similar type of journey. But really appreciate you being here today, Brian, to share your experience so far. I know there's a lot left to learn. I'd love to do a checkpoint with you here in a few months. I'm sure we'll both know a lot more and have a bit more experience under our belts with AI here in the coming months. But really appreciate you sharing sort of your in the trenches view as you're getting into it right now. So thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you to the audience for being here today. I appreciate you all being here and listening in today. If you are interested in more AI strategy types of content, check out this guide to AI strategy and implementation. That's a guide you can get off our website for free. Just scan the QR code right here. I'll include a link below. A great guide, but it does not contain the knowledge that we just discussed here today from your lessons, Brian. So thank you for being here today and adding to our collective knowledge here as it relates to AI strategy. We'll release this podcast in a week from today as a formal episode of Transformation Ground Control. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes, and keep an eye out for this one that will be released next week. So thanks for being here to the audience. Thanks for the great questions. Thank you for being here, Brian. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place, where we always talk about this stuff related to digital transformation from a tech agnostic perspective. So thanks again, Brian, for being here. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
All right. Well, have a good week, everyone. Take care, and we will see you all soon.